Welcome back to On the Horizon podcast, hosted by Jessie Sage and Melrose Michaels. First, thank you so much for becoming a premium subscriber and supporting our podcast. This is getting you extra exclusive, unheard, and unseen footage from each interview that we have on the horizon. Juniper Fitzgerald is first and foremost a mother. She's written extensively on her intersection of motherhood and sex work and considers herself an anti-capitalist. She holds a PhD, but please don't hold that against her. Before we even hit record on this episode, you brought up this idea around empathy. And I think that that's really magical. I'd love for you to expand on that.
Okay, so empathy. I definitely think, I'm not sure that the sex industry writ large has taught me empathy, but my relationships with other laborers have definitely taught me empathy. And I've had so many diverse experiences in the sex industry that and who knows what life would have been like without those experiences, right? Like,
right,
you never know. However, my child is in this stage of growth that is apparently like a pre-teenager hormonal shift. And I'm like, whoa, like that's what I hear myself saying almost every day. I'm like, whoa, like the responses to things are just really emotional right now. I do think that I have a certain, and not to toot my own horn, because I definitely fuck up parenting all the time, but there's a certain like empathetic place that I go to that I felt like I learned in the sex industry, you know, when you're navigating all of these really big personalities, like I think of the first strip club I ever worked at and like meeting some girls that were really fucking scary and because they're like intense and beautiful and wonderful, but also scary. And like navigating their big emotions definitely taught me a lot about empathy. And I hope at least that I can bring that to my relationship with my kid. I'm not always great at it, but you know, just being able to sit with big emotions that I don't quite understand is definitely a gift that I've received from other laborers in the sex industry.
I was actually thinking about, like, as you were talking about the relationships you had with workers, I've also found that, like, the fact that, like, with like customers and clients, you have to give them like so much direct, like emotional attention, like hold like so much space, like for how somebody else is feeling is also like something that you can bring to like parenting. I was thinking about that as you were talking. Like it's really easy to get like caught up in your day-to-day life and to not be paying attention to what's going on. And then like when you're at work, or at least when I'm at work, like it's a time that I'm like not checking Twitter at the same time as I'm having a conversation and, you know, like trying to give somebody some like attention that they feel like they want and need. But then it's easy to extrapolate from that and be like, oh, but like everybody wants this kind of like to be like seen and to be like validated and like that's also like taking time out, like even when you're at home to like do that with, even when you're at home with your kids, like to do that, I think is like, to me, I was thinking about that as you were talking.
But also the flip side to that is also learning boundaries. When I started in the sex industry, I have this horrible story that I write about in my book that's coming out that I just really don't even want to put energy into repeating here. But, you know, I had no idea how to say no to shit. And that's not a problem of the sex industry. That's a problem of the way that girls are raised.
Yeah.
You know, and it was through these encounters of like, what the fuck, man, that I started to develop the language to be like, no.
Yeah.
And I think even my, you know, I have a few parent friends here that are really cool. And, you know, even those parents there's still an element of like a sense that it's a women and girls' duty to like appease. And so some of the lessons of the sex industry that I've garnered are like, no. Maybe if they're paying you, but don't do that shit for free. Like,
I think that's really important, actually.
The biggest strength a woman can have in business is the like solidarity in your voice, like knowing your voice and knowing when to say no. Because that's like the one thing not one thing, there's many things we don't have an upper hand on the playing field, but that's one of the biggest ones is like saying no. You don't have to please everyone. You don't have to make everyone happy. Yeah. You have to walk in the room and wonder like, instead of do they like me? Do I like them? Like flipping that inner narrative, that takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good because I see that with other parents, like not wanting to say no to things or trying to like make their kids like happy. And like recently with my teenager, he wanted to go to this like party after homecoming. And I was like, is anybody going to be there? And he's like, no parents are going to be there. And I was like, no, you're not going to that. And he was really mad at me. And I was like, oh, get over it. Like, I don't want him to be at this thing that I have no idea whose house it is. And,
I love that your mind went to like saying no to your kid. That's equally important. I guess what I was thinking about was like teaching my kid to say no.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true too.
I need my kid to know that like nobody can just like touch your hair. Nobody like even the smallest thing. No, you get to turn around and be like, do not do that.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I was thinking of like, there's safety and boundaries for kids too, you know? And like, for me, it's been easier, I think, to be like, no, I don't care that other people are doing that.
Yes.
Like, you're still not doing it. And there's like some safety in that.
I think like the peer pressure, I don't have kids, obviously. So that speaking on the subject, I have less to give, I feel like. But when you're talking, like when you're saying no to your kid, we had this whole conversation earlier about your other child. Yeah. And how it's like, I hear you, I validate your feeling, I don't care. Like this is what is happening. So I think even the power from a mom to say that and for a kid to receive that is like, oh, like I'm being heard. I feel seen, but the decision has been made. Like, okay, gotta leave it alone.
But yeah, I mean, I feel that, but like what you're saying too, I think is really important. And I see this with like especially my littlest son because he's autistic and is nonverbal, and so much of the work that they're trying to do is like say hi to them when they come in the room and say bye. And he does need to learn some things, but like, I also want him to know that like, he doesn't need to be like forced into things that are like very uncomfortable for him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you were talking about it the other way. I find myself explaining that to my husband a lot, not like to educate him, but just to like make my case, like this is where I'm coming from when I'm talking to you about something, is that like the whole societal structure, especially for female children, especially, it's beat into you. Like I remember growing up, I was always too loud. I was always, being told to be quiet. I was always too bossy, which I always, looking back now, is so funny because like, no, I'm like, I have leadership qualities and like, I like to take charge of things. But like to my mom and me being a kid, I was bossy, or like all of these characteristics where when you're an adult and you're like a fully formed human, you look back on, you're like, no, those are just my character traits. And you were just telling me to make them small because it was uncomfortable for you or for the situation or the circumstance. Right. And like, I hope that I don't do that to my kids. I hope that I'm not a product that, does the cycle. But I remember that so vividly.
You won't. You'll be a great mom. I think another thing that I experienced as a kid was being called dramatic. And like the way that I would try to talk about like the way that my own body had been violated as a kid, the response was always like, you're being dramatic. And so to be able to be surrounded by a community of people who are marginalized and really do understand consent in a way that is stronger, I think, than the vast majority of at least Americans, has really influenced my ability to trust my child. Like when they say that something is uncomfortable, like believing it and not
minimizing it.
Yeah, minimizing it.
Phoenix Calida is a former sex worker turned public speaker, podcast creator, and host. Her lived experience in survival and street-based sex work as an Afro-queer Latina and survivor of sexual violence and police brutality has molded her into an outspoken advocate for anti-racism, income inequality, and sex worker rights. As a woman of color with chronic illness and mental health issues, she is a passionate voice for mental health visibility, access to care, and speaking truth to gender and racial bias within healthcare frameworks.
You know, I would like to also bring up this topic because we kind of spoke about it in another interview yesterday when we were on this parenting topic. And it was how, like, kind of the feminist movement and their feelings towards bodily autonomy and abortion doesn't always translate into our movement, and like why
Often doesn't. Yeah.
Almost always doesn't. And why there's this disconnect. I wondered if you could expand on that too, if you had any thoughts.
But why I think that is?
Yeah. Like why those things aren't connecting. Or I guess you can explain why they should, but I feel like that's obvious.
Well, I think they should. I think that they just don't connect because a lot of feminists are white and have money. And that's just kind of that.
Yeah.
Like, I always hate like saying it like that because it sounds so reductive, but I'm pretty convinced like that's like a big part of the problem because for a lot of women, having an abortion is something that you might actually have to do at some point in your life.
Right.
But like theoretically, you know, based on the messaging that we get from society, if you live your life right, there's really not odds you're going to be a sex worker because good moms don't do that.
Yeah.
Abortion, you may end up in a spot, you may end up in a situation, right? But as far as like being a sex worker or being like a homeless woman who, you know, is like experiencing like sexual violence on the streets, things like that. Like there's really, we're still, even a lot of feminists are still very much stuck in that sort of, but if I follow the rules and do things right, I won't end up there. And so I think that that's a big part of the reason that they don't care. I think a lot
it feels so distant. If you've never been in a situation in which like you're just trying to survive, like that feels so distant.
Yeah, I think that's like, I don't, can we make it like the Les Mis test, right? Like Les Miserables. Remember when that was that like 20 years ago now? It feels like forever ago that shit came out with like Anne Hathaway.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But just like it was so interesting watching like reviews and critiques of that movie. Like you could tell who had done sex work and who didn't. Because like she's cutting off her hair and selling her teeth, and it's like she probably should have kept the teeth and hair, and she could have charged more. Really, it's like that was like a very like those were the two sides of that conversation. And it was like I feel like if you get the latter one, you understand why abortion rights should be part of sex work. But if the first one you thought, you should probably talk to more sex workers about why your shit like isn't including them. You know?
Yeah.
So funny once you have done sex work, like I feel like I don't know. I have like a brain that works to like all the time. Like, wait, how can I like get in on that?
Yeah. How do I make this work for me or charge this? And like, yeah.
Seriously. Yeah, no, I think that, but I also think that that really does speak to, you know, obviously one, resilience of sex workers to be able to survive, and show versatility to survive in these type of situations. But, you know, it does speak to that sort of thing of, how just wild this shit sounds if you've never lived it or you've never been close to experiencing it or you've never had to seriously consider like, I really may not be able to pay them my rent this month. So I may be in a situation, you know, for the rest of the month or whatever. But like, I think that's the biggest thing is it's just so foreign to them that they can't imagine it. But because it's foreign, it's really easy to other sex workers and just shit on sex workers. Cause it's like, well, are they even real people? Like they're not here with us, like the regular people.
Right.
You know? And so it really does, I think, feed that stigma as well.
I think the fact that like sex work is so underground also contributes to that because sex workers are among all of the people who think that they aren't.
Yeah. They just can't be outspoken about it.
Absolutely. But, you know, I think that those are, you know, some of the reasons for it. And I also think that, let's be honest, a lot of feminists who are anti-sex worker are also anti-trans, and a lot of sex workers are trans, just, you know, which again, like, you know, saying was like, oh, they don't deserve living wages. Why do they do sex work? Like, you know, we should be able to discriminate against trans people. Don't hire trans women. Also, why are so many trans women doing sex work?
Right.
I don't know. You know?
Yeah. They have like blind spots where they can't connect those dots, where like anyone who's worked in the industry like can so easily connect all those dots and understand why there are so many trans folks and so many disabled folks and so many caretakers in sex work.
Yeah, they all missed the cause and effect part of third grade because that was like real evident. But okay.
Seriously, but then you think about it, like what groups are most overrepresented in sex work and which groups are most underrepresented in like the modern feminist or the current feminist movement, right?
Right.
Not really a safe for like non-white women. It's not really a safe for space for trans women. It's not really a space for sex workers. It's not a space for disabled women. It's not a space for like women in poverty. Like, not a space for people who are like non-binary but still like lean femme or look femme or assigned female at birth, even if they don't identify as women. Like all these people who are overrepresented in sex work are underrepresented in feminism, and like I kind of feel like that should tell us something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What about like talking about sexuality with your kids? Do you feel like you were well equipped to be able to do that because of your like history?
I think so. Yes. I mean, you always like want to, try to like gauge what you're telling your kids, make sure, right, it's age appropriate or it's not too much. But no, I think that overall it's easier. Like, so obviously like you've seen some things. So you already are coming in with like more world experience than most folks, right? So you're already more comfortable. But also I just find that like sex workers are less shamey in general. Because well, this isn't new. I've seen this before. Yeah, I've heard that before. Yes, I thought not the first time someone's asked me about that,
Yeah,
I think like that sort of being able to be chill about it is really helpful when talking to your kids, because a lot of parents, I think, go in well-meaning, but they're like so stressed out themselves that like
reactive.
With the kids are like, okay, now I'm going to talk to you about sex. You don't have to have sex, but if you do, here's how you use it. And it's like this very tense, this is how you use a condom, right? Like, it's just uncomfortable for everyone. And it's like, relax, it's fine. Right? Like, no, we're actually going to talk about sex. It's a thing that people do. Like, let's chill and have a conversation and talk about gender and sexuality and consent and all those things. And, I also think that it's important just in terms of like sex education and honestly, even gender issues as well. Like sex workers are really good at negotiating consent and boundaries. Better than the general public, I would say.
Yeah.
So if you want people to teach sex ed to your kids, you should probably hire sex workers, right? And people would be like, oh, she's saying she wants them to fuck the kids, right? Like, of course, that's how people are going to frame it. But like, no, seriously, you should be asking sex workers, like ask experts on boundaries and consent and negotiation to teach kids about boundaries, consent, and negotiations, because this shit we currently have is a disaster.
I remember when I was doing a lot of phone sex, I would often have young people like call me to ask about like basically like sex education questions. Like, and I thought that was really interesting that like they didn't know where to turn because like they had no people who were teaching them that. Their like families didn't teach them about that. And so like one time I remember a kid calling a kid, he was like 19, he was old enough to have a credit card, I guess. But like he called and said like, I'm about to have this thing with my roommate and I don't know like how to negotiate that. And I don't know like how to stop it if I don't like it. Cause it was like he was gearing up to have like a first homosexual like experience. And, and I had to say to him, because he was like, I'm afraid I don't want to start it because like then I'll get to a point of no return. And I was like, wait, hold up. Like that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, you can stop something that you start if it's not good for you. But like nobody had ever told him that. Yep. Like nobody had ever said like that sex isn't an on or off, that like you could kiss and not like go any further.
Yeah.
You can like,
there's always an out. Like, I think that's a common thread amongst most people that really don't understand consent in general. Yeah. Like, and that's what you mean by saying like the general population are not experts on these things. They think once you say yes, it's everyone can do whatever they want. Yeah, the whole time. Right. No changing your mind.
Well, yeah, and I think it's so evident, like everything from, like that creepy ass MRA shit with the consent cards. What the fuck is that?
Oh, I didn't
what is that? Tell us what that is.
Oh, where like it's literally like a card that's saying like I consent to have sex with this person, and like you sign it and date it. And like I preface this by saying MRAs, right? These are like men's rights activists.
Yeah.
That like that sort of like, what is that? They call it like manosphere, like the incels and the men's rights activists and the pickup artists.
Goosebumps.
Yeah.
that fucking cesspit of the internet. But,
Right.
but like, no, like they actually had these cards made up and they were like, gonna sign the card. And that means like you're consenting to sex on this day at this time with this person and blah, blah, blah. So that like, then I can't be accused of rape after the fact. And I was like, you can absolutely be accused of rape after the fact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Like, and then also like, even just how generic these cards were, it just said something like having sex. And I was like, well, what kind of sex?
Right.
Yeah, be specific.
Because like vaginal is not the same as anal. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, so what kind of sex? Or like, are you talking about oral sex? Are you saying that like once someone signs this card, they can't revoke their consent? Like, what the fuck are you saying?
Right.
You know, but like people were like, this is a good idea. This will cut down confusion. And I was like,
No.
what? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on? And you know,
Yeah.
that, and also, you know, obviously like a lot of puritanical teaching around consent, that it's like, that's what Jesus wants and that's how you do it. And, you know, if you're with someone, you can't tell them no. And I wish I could remember who did the study, but I want to say it was a UK source. And they were asking young people questions like, you know, like high school, college age folks. And like, it was just, I don't remember what the number was, but it was something wild. It was almost like 1 in 3 of them, almost like 30% thought that if a man, both men and women, by the way, said that like, if a guy buys you dinner, you're obligated to like have sexual contact with him. And I was like,
Wow.
that's not how consent works at all. So yeah, no, I'll
That
teach
just like sex work.
also that part, but then I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. Setting Jasmine is a licensed psychotherapist and owner of Blue Pearl Therapy, a virtual mental health practice specializing in intimacy, post-injury, trauma, illness, and sex-positive parenting. Jasmine is co-owner, along with her partner, King Noir, of Royal Fetish Films, where the love of the arts, film, and sex education are combined to produce content that stimulates and engages the audience to explore sexual boundaries.
How do you respond to people who say like, well, how would you feel if your kids did the work that you do?
Yeah, I get that all the time. And I tell them that I would be, if this is the work that they want to do, I'd be proud of them, because not only do I know that they'd be choosing that on their own, right? So there's no one, we're not pushing our kids to be anything. We just want them to be great at whatever it is that they want to do.
Yeah.
So I'd be proud that they were able to make a independent decision, and I would really feel much more secure than I probably would have ever felt in my life, because I know that they're going to be the most prepared to join this industry. Then, you know, if you would have asked me that before I consider myself a professional in this field, I may have taken pause, because I do know that people do get exploited in this line of work. People enter this line of work not knowing exactly what all it entails, you know, thinking that you could do it anonymously.
I thought that actually, like, I'm embarrassed when I think back to my early self, and I was like, I just want to dip my toes in, but I'm not really going to be a part of it. And I will just like stop when I feel like it. And I think I didn't understand that, like, you can't take that shit back. Like, it's there.
Yep. For me, the first time I wrote my full name on probably like a 2257 or a model release, and they needed my ID, and I was like, so this gets filed somewhere.
This is a moment.
And I always tell people that, like, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, when I was getting like inundated with like, how do I work from home? How do I go online? How do I start an OnlyFans? Like, I would say, like, at this point in the internet, like, you don't dabble. You either like do it or you don't do it, because like
nope, you're in it or you're not. I got that a lot in the beginning with the pandemic too, because there was a lot of people coming into like the digital space for like OnlyFans. They're like, well, I want to do this anonymously, or how do I do it? I'm like, look, you can be like a no face model. Like, people make livings like that, but like you still give your ID to this company to prove you're of age. That's not going anywhere. Like, we have to do that. And we should have, like, there's a degree that you need to verify your age. Like, that's what it is. So that was an interesting conversation.
But I just think it's funny that you say that, because there isn't, people will find out. It's not like, when will people find out? Or it's not if people will find out.
It's when.
It's when. Yeah.
So for them, it, you know, if they are interested, I mean, even my daughter, she considers herself a part of the sex work adjacent, because of the workshops that she does speaking about being adjacent to the sex work community. So, just she appeared in a magazine about talking about porn and parenting. And it was just like one of those moments, like, this is where you don't get to pretend that like your mom is just a therapist. Like, people know now, right?
Yeah.
As well as when she does we do some management of talent and their content creation, and she runs like the fiscal aspect of it. So they're already, well, at least she is already working in the industry, and I couldn't be any more proud. Like, she's using the skill set that she has. She's in a space where she finds it's comfortable. And I think a lot of people also feel like the minute that they hear sex work or the sex industry, they only think about porn performers, right? And not the many different people that we employ to get our content out there. And I think the more we sort of normalize that the sex industry is beyond the model, the more people will start to see like, oh, it's a legitimate industry. It creates jobs there, so I would not be, so my response to them usually is that I would be proud that they made this decision on their own. And the second thing is that I feel much more safer and secure knowing that anything that my kids do, they're going to be better than me at it, because I'm going to make sure that they have the skill set, the network, the tools to be safe and successful.
Yeah. That's really great. Is there anything that we didn't ask you about that you think is important to bring up in this topic?
I know that you have such a wide range of listeners. And so my thought process is, if, we can see us here talking about our families, like every sex worker has like a whole story, they have friends, they have family, they have children, they have pets, husbands, spouses, we belong to our families, whether those are families of choice or our family of origin. And so, I'm not saying that like, treat every one of your sex workers like your sister type of thing. that might be your thing, but really like to get into the headspace of normalizing that, yes, while we're here to provide a service and a fantasy and companionship, that to please please think about respecting us as very important people in our communities, very important people in our households. The interactions that we have with our fans inform how we respond in our communities and with our families. So, sort of put that in sort of your mix of working with sex workers. And I think it'll be a safer experience for all of us when we see each other as, full comprehensive human beings. I also think that for those of us who have children and are listening to this and feel like I would never tell my kids that I'm a sex worker, I encourage you to take some time with that thought. Is it around the shame of the work that you do? And if so, that could be worked through. I suggest a lot of us carry shame for a lot of things, not necessarily just the type of work that we do. Maybe it's the messaging that we heard growing up, or how society makes you feel about the work that you do. But sometimes what we won't say is a reflection of what we're experiencing, more of a projection. And I think about those folks that are trying to live those double lives, that one, there's so much freedom in being who you are. There's benefits and there is no consequence, in my opinion, that is bigger than being authentic to who I am. And I always would prefer that my children and my family learned about what I did through me, and not through the news or the newspaper. I would certainly hope that they are never shocked by something someone may say about me or share about me, because I don't tell them every single detail, but they will never be shocked about the fact that this is the decision that I've made for my life. And in doing that, even if they don't agree, I'm giving them the defense should they choose to want to defend me. And I'm also giving them the choice to disconnect if they choose to do that. So, I believe that we can give people choices without taking away our own.
We hope you enjoyed this bonus footage from this episode of On the Horizon, and we look forward to having you tune in next time.